Jeremiah is mostly a book of prophecy. It's also a book with some great stories. And I'm looking forward to exploring together many of the stories and events of Jeremiah's life and the life of the nation at this time. To understand the stories, we first need to know a bit about the world in Jeremiah's day. Under David, Israel became a great kingdom. Under his son Solomon, politically they became an even greater kingdom. They were wealthy, their borders were secure, there was a grand temple built for God and a wonderful palace built for the king. The city of Jerusalem was expanded and its walls made strong. All over Israel, many great cities were built and strengthened. There are still remains of really impressive city gates built by Solomon in some places of Israel. But after King David and Solomon, the nation stopped following Yahweh. In those days, each nation had their own gods. There were many, many different gods that were worshipped. And so I want to be really clear who I'm speaking about in this series. The personal name for God that Israel used in those days is Yahweh. Yahweh is the name God revealed to Moses when he revealed himself at the burning bush. Jewish people came to regard that name as so holy that they wouldn't say it. And they would say Lord instead when it came up in their scriptures. And many English Bibles follow the same tradition. Where the Hebrew text says Yahweh, they print Lord in the Bible. But our God is not just any God. Jeremiah knew him by his name. He revealed himself to Jeremiah by his name, Yahweh. Not just any God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the Lord Most High. So after King David, and actually during the time of Solomon, the nation stopped following Yahweh. Yahweh warned them through various prophets that if they didn't follow him, the kingdom would be divided and would be defeated. And that's exactly what happened. There was a rebellion and there was a civil war, and Israel split in two. The northern kingdom kept the name Israel. Not one single king of the northern kingdom followed God. Every single one of them turned another way. Eventually, the Assyrian Empire destroyed the north, carried the survivors off as slaves, and there was really not much left. The southern kingdom became known as Judah because the tribe of Judah was the main group of people left in that southern kingdom. David came from the line of Judah. 1,000 years later, Jesus came from the line of Judah. And Judah still had as its capital city, Jerusalem. Judah was still led by kings in the line of David, yet most of those kings rejected Yahweh. Just a few good ones came along. Well, at the time of Jeremiah, the nation of Judah was under great threat. They were under threat from the north, from Assyria. They were under threat as the Babylonian Empire seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. From the south, they were under threat from the Egyptian Empire. They were sort of sandwiched between these great empires, all fighting for supremacy. And during Jeremiah's life, there were 5 different kings in his one lifetime. So much change. 5 kings that we meet in the book of Jeremiah. Now, first there was one of those rare good kings, Josiah. Some of you might be familiar with some of Josiah's story. He became king when he was only 8 years old. When he became king, the nation was living in a terrible way, but Josiah heard the prophets. Josiah ordered that the temple be repaired and cleaned up. And in the temple, a priest found a book of the law, probably the book of Deuteronomy, and he brought it to the king. And Josiah read it, and he was really distressed. He realized what God had called them to be, how God wanted them to live. He realized how far from that they were, and he worked really hard to clean it all up. If you read the story of Josiah's reforms from the book of 2 Kings, you see just how far Israel had gone. In 2 Kings we read, certain things had been put in the Lord's temple that had been made to honour the god Baal, the female god Asherah, and all the stars in the sky. Josiah took those things that had been in the Lord's temple and he burned them outside Jerusalem. Josiah got rid of the priests that served other gods. Those priests of other gods had burned incense in the high places around the towns of Judah, and they burned it on the high places around Jerusalem. They burned incense to honour Baal and honour the sun and moon. They burned it to honour the stars. Josiah removed the Asherah pole from the Lord's temple. It had been used to worship the female god named Asherah. He took it to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem. There he burned it and ground it into powder. He tore down the rooms where the temple prostitutes stayed. He destroyed the high place at Topheth because he didn't want anyone to use the high place to sacrifice his son or daughter to the god named Molech. Josiah removed the statues of horses from the entrance to the Lord's temple. The kings of Judah had set them apart to honour the sun. He pulled down the altars the kings of Judah had set up on the palace roof. So you can see the nation hadn't gone just a little way from God. The nation had set up this whole system, including temple prostitutes and sacrificing children. It was a mess, and Josiah did his best to clean it up, and he was mostly a good king. Jeremiah's call happened in the 13th year of Josiah's reign, when Josiah found that book of the law. It was in the 18th year of his reign. So Jeremiah was a prophet for 5 years before Josiah started following God again, and then through Josiah's time afterwards. We only have one prophecy of Jeremiah that was during Josiah's time. And this is probably because Josiah listened to the prophecy and made the changes and started to restore things. When Josiah died, the book of 2 Chronicles tells us Jeremiah wrote songs of sadness that were sung by many. Well, Josiah's son Jehoahaz became king after him when he was 23 years old. Jehoahaz did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. Jehoahaz only ruled for 3 months before he was captured by Pharaoh Necho of Egypt. Josiah's next son Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he also did what was evil in the eyes of God. To appease Pharaoh Necho, Jehoiakim paid the Pharaoh 4 tons of silver and 75 pounds of gold. Now, raising that amount in the form of taxes greatly impoverished the people. And it was a wasted effort anyway, since Babylon came down and defeated Assyria and pushed Egypt back to its own borders, and now it was Babylon they had to keep on side. We don't know why Jehoiakim died quite young, but his son Jehoiachin became the next king. Again, Jehoiachin did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Babylonian Empire attacked Jerusalem, and they carried off Jehoiachin when he'd only been king for 3 months. Babylon emptied the temple and they emptied the palace of everything valuable. They carried off lots of people as slaves and prisoners. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon agreed that Zedekiah could be king if Zedekiah promised complete loyalty to Babylon. Well, eventually Zedekiah stopped being loyal to the king of Babylon, and so Nebuchadnezzar came and completely destroyed Jerusalem, burned it to the ground, smashed it to pieces. The whole place was burned by fire. And there was no nation of Israel and no nation of Judah anymore. Later, some of the remnants in Judah fled to Egypt, and they forcibly took Jeremiah with them. And as far as we know, Jeremiah spent the rest of his days in Egypt. Most of the prophecies in the book of Jeremiah come from the reigns of Jehoiakim and from Jehoiakim and from Zedekiah, because they were kings who ruled for quite a bit of time in Jeremiah's life, and they were kings who weren't listening to God and needed lots and lots of warnings. But today we're at the start. Today, at the start of Jeremiah, Josiah is king, and Jeremiah is a young man. The book of Jeremiah is not in chronological order. The chapters aren't in the order of history. And so our series won't follow the book chapter by chapter. We'll move around the different chapters, but move in order of the story of Jeremiah. And we'll be looking at 10 different prophecies and events from Jeremiah's life.